Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today I'll be doing episode 434, Time Warp Heals All Wounds. The episode begins in our Pokemon Center with Ash and the gang there. And this Pokemon Center was in Fuchsia City, so Ash and the gang were very close to the Battle Pike, since it was very close to Fuchsia City. Brock was still feeding his Bonsly some more milk, while May was really excited, holding her Pokemon egg in its incubator, eagerly awaiting it to hatch, with Ash admitting that he was excited for it to hatch too, even if he was more excited to go to the Battle Pike. Brock then asked Bonsly if it was liking the milk, because you remember how Bonsly suddenly didn't like the milk one time, but thankfully Bonsly nodded, so it did like the milk after all. Just then, Nurse Joy walked over to Ash and the gang and greeted them, and they greeted Nurse Joy in return. Nurse Joy instantly noticed May's egg and wished to see it, so May held it up to her, and Nurse Joy stated that she was sure that it would be a strong and healthy Pokemon that hatched out of it when it did hatch. Brock then decided to quit feeding his Bonsly in order to quickly make his way next to Nurse Joy, trying to flirt with her as usual, which makes the poor Nurse Joy a little bit uncomfortable and surprised by Brock's actions. Now, Brock had more bad things happening to him than just Nurse Joy not being very interested in him, because Bonsly was not happy at being ignored in favor of Nurse Joy, because it really wanted more milk, so it tackled Brock away from Nurse Joy onto the ground, and it hopped up and down in anger, begging Brock to resume feeding it. Brock was left embarrassed and somewhat knocked out after the attack. Before Brock could get up, Bonsly got even more miserable, starting to cry in shock as it saw that Munchlax had popped out of its Pokeball, and it was incredibly hungry, so it gulped down the entire bottle of Bonsly's milk in one go, as if it was its own bottle. May and Max tried to scold Munchlax for being greedy and taking something that wasn't its own, but Bonsly didn't stop crying, and Munchlax didn't stop drinking, so Brock tried desperately to comfort Bonsly, holding it in his arms once again. Brock does manage to calm Bonsly down a bit, but at the same time, Nurse Joy knew that a baby that was hungry wouldn't stop crying for a long time, so she advised Brock to go to the cafeteria in the center, since there was plenty of food there, and decided to leave the entire gang there so they could all get something to eat, including Munchlax, so that it could focus on eating something that Bonsly wasn't eating. And also adds that the cafeteria was a great break spot as well, just to take a rest. So hearing this, Brock carries Bonsly over to the cafeteria, and Max and Munchlax go too, with Max keeping watch over Munchlax to make sure it didn't do anything bad. As for Ash, as opposed to resting, he decided that continuing to train with Pikachu for his Battle Pike match was more important, so he officially went outside with Pikachu to go train, and Squirtle for some reason ran after Ash and Pikachu. May wondered why the fuck Squirtle was interested in following Ash and Pikachu, so she decided to follow outside as well, to ensure that Squirtle didn't get into any trouble. Anyways, just as Ash walked into the Pokemon Center, he was being watched by Team Rocket from some trees, utilizing binoculars. Obviously, seeing Pikachu made Team Rocket happy, since they wanted to catch it, as usual, but James then spotted Squirtle running out of the Pokemon Center into the distance as well, with May trailing behind it. James was in the midst of suggesting that they steal Squirtle too when he saw May, and got worried, thinking that two members of Ash and the gang may be too much for them to deal with, along with two Pokemon at the same time. James and Meowth were very eager to simply just steal Pikachu and Squirtle, aside from the risks though, because they really wanted them, but Jessie was the smart one for once, and said she had a better idea than just running in and grabbing the Pokemon they wanted, as always, and instead suggested that the three of them split up for now to attempt to take each Pokemon separately, reasoning that whenever they stuck together, they always failed their missions, so maybe if they separated, they could actually get something, even if two of them failed, and one of them was successful, Team Rocket would at least get something. Meowth and James were a bit annoyed by the idea of splitting up, but they eventually agreed to it, because Jessie was persistent. Squirtle had gotten a little too carried away, running around, enjoying the scenery, because it wasn't actually going after Ash. It was just curious, so it wanted to walk around, and it eventually got lost, being in a completely different direction, away from Ash. But it didn't know how to make its way back, so it just kept running ahead, as May, not far behind, shouted out to Squirtle in hopes that it would hear her and make its way back to her. As Squirtle continues to run, it eventually makes it to a train station and goes inside. As for May, she had lost track of Squirtle as she was examining the area around her, having arrived in, according to her, the most desolate and abandoned part of town, as she noticed that all the windows were boarded up, and all the buildings looked old and not taken care of, and there were a whole bunch of empty little vehicles and carriages as well. May, however, noticed that one building wasn't abandoned and was still open, and walked into it, thinking that maybe Squirtle wandered in there, and sure enough, Squirtle did, because this was the train station it had just went into. As soon as May entered, she immediately recognized the building as a train station. But she was very confused upon entering, because the train station was open, but it appeared abandoned, just like all the other buildings. Regardless, she checked out inside, still calling for Squirtle. But instead of coming across Squirtle, she instead came across a framed picture on a bench, and she took a closer look at it, walking over to the bench, and saw that it was taken a long time ago, as it was black and white, and the photo depicted what seemed to be a mother and a son in a large and lively-looking town square. And this led May to come to the conclusion that this part of Fuchsia City used to be livelier back in the day, along with this station, because she could see people coming out of the train station in the photograph. Anyways, she wondered why a random ass picture would be resting on a bench in an abandoned train station, but simply just continued to search for Squirtle until she walked through a door at the other end of the station, bringing her outside, where she immediately heard Squirtle's familiar cry. So she looked over to see Squirtle being held by an old woman sitting on one of the benches outside the train station. May immediately apologizes to the old woman if her Squirtle caused any trouble for her, but the old woman assured her that it didn't, and she enjoyed being with Squirtle, because it was a nice Pokemon. But she knew that she had to give Squirtle back to its trainer, so she handed it back to May, and May thanked her, as the old woman then introduced herself as Edna, and May introduced herself as well, saying it was very nice to meet her. Just then, it starts to rain, but the old woman shows no reaction, as opposed to May, who freaked out a little bit. So May asked the old woman why she wasn't showing any reaction to such bad weather. as the woman, Edna, sadly gazed at the train tracks where some foliage was growing, as she claimed that she was waiting for the steam train to arrive that had a man she was waiting for on board. May was very confused by this, as the station was clearly abandoned. There couldn't have been a steam train on its way. Although, when May told Edna this, Edna denied this, stating that she would continue to wait, and was about to say why, when suddenly she was cut short when her granddaughter, Katrina, rushed in, frantically looking for her grandma, calling out for her because she was worried that she was alone in the rain, and she even had an umbrella prepared to use. Edna formally addressed her granddaughter and introduced her to May, and both May and Edna's granddaughter, Katrina, greeted each other as Katrina insisted that her grandmother at least take the umbrella to protect herself from the rain. Edna sadly took the umbrella, even though she was unwilling to take it at first, since she knew exactly what Katrina would say next, and sure enough, Edna was right, as Katrina asked Edna to come back inside. Edna did get up off the bench, but she simply walked away by herself, with a lonely look on her face, sad that the train didn't arrive yet. Edna then started to mutter some stuff to herself, disappointed in herself that she might have missed the steam train service. Basically, even though she had been watching the entire time, she somehow thought she had somehow missed the train going by, and she also muttered about how today reminded her of the day where someone went missing, and how she wished it had snowed during some day. Katrina and May watched Edna walk away, worried, but just then, May noticed a picture lying on the bench where Edna was sitting, indicating that Edna had left the picture there, presumably by accident. May also noticed that the picture was black and white, just like the one from earlier, and she also noticed that there was a woman in the picture that looked like Edna, but younger, and also a man sitting beside her on a bench with her. Meanwhile, we then see that Jessie was spying on Ash and Pikachu from the bushes while Ash and Pikachu were training, and Jessie smiled to herself, saying that with her sneaky abilities, it would be very easy for her to get Pikachu all on her own, because Meowth and James wouldn't mess her up. Ash then orders Pikachu to practice his Volt Tackle, and Pikachu does so, running straight into a rock and exploding it, because of the sheer power of the attack. One of the shards of the rock goes flying and hits Jessie right in the face, and sending her knocked back further into the bushes, unknown to Ash and Pikachu, as Jessie was now knocked out, unable to do anything. Ash then congratulates Pikachu for his agile attacks, being enough to destroy an entire rock, as Pikachu celebrates its powerful attack, and the electricity around it dissipates. Meanwhile, James was spying inside a window leading into the Pokémon Center from on top of a box outside, and he saw Max, Munchlax, Brock, and Bonsly all chowing down on a whole bunch of food in the cafeteria, with Bonsly sticking solely to the milk that Brock had prepared. James really wished that he was in the center with them right now, digging in on all the food, but he tried to keep himself distracted, telling himself that he had to focus on stealing May's Munchlax and Brock's Bonsly, but he couldn't focus on coming up with a plan because he was too hungry upon seeing all the delicious food, and really wished he could have it, and got depressed when he couldn't. And eventually, as he just continued to stand there, he caught a cold from being outside in the cold weather for too long, since it was still raining. We then cut back to May and Katrina just outside of the train station, as May showed Katrina the photograph with Edna, and asked if Edna really was in the picture, and who the man was, leaving Katrina to explain that the picture was of her grandparents, Edna and her late husband Jonathan, who had passed away long before she was born, so she actually never even got to meet her grandfather. Also, the person that Edna was waiting for was Jonathan, and apparently the pendant around Edna's neck was really important, at least the one in the picture anyways. May naturally asked why the fuck the pendant was important, and why she was waiting for Jonathan anyways, so Katrina explained her grandmother's past through a flashback, a black and white flashback even. The first thing the flashback showed was a breeding center, because Edna and Jonathan used to operate a breeding center where they cared for and nurtured Pokemon eggs, and they were pretty famous breeders at the time. However, the flashback then cuts from the couple looking after eggs to a tense conversation over a light at the dinner table. Basically, Jonathan was telling Edna that he had to leave the little outskirts of town they were on to go into the main Fuchsia City, so that he could study medicine and become even better of a Pokemon breeder, and maybe even a full doctor. Edna wasn't too impressed with this, and refused to leave her hometown, saying she didn't want to leave the place where she was born and raised. And Jonathan argued back that he had to leave this part of town and go to the main Fuchsia City if he wanted to get a proper medical degree. Unfortunately, Edna and Jonathan couldn't come to a compromise, so Jonathan obviously didn't want to keep arguing with his wife, so he went to the train station and left a goodbye letter for Edna that also functioned as a bit of an invitation. Basically, it said, yo, if you want to come with me, I'll be at the train station, and if not, then goodbye. Edna therefore quickly ran to the station, catching the attention of everyone there, as well as everyone in the city square on the way, to inform her husband that she was having their baby. So that was another reason why she didn't really want to leave. We then see Jonathan's perspective, which was him waiting very hopefully for his wife to show up, but it appeared that Edna had gotten the letter too late, so Jonathan thought that she wasn't coming, so Jonathan frustratingly gritted his teeth and boarded the train without her. But unfortunately, it was immediately after this that Edna arrived at the train station, holding the letter with her, so she was too late to board the train, or at least talk to her husband and convince him to stay. So, much to her dismay, she never got to even say goodbye to her husband either. And she was so sad about this that she attracted the attention of an old guy and a youngish guy standing by her, and they tried to comfort her. Unfortunately, while they were trying to comfort her, Edna tried to get up and accidentally ran into the old gentleman, and after that, it appeared that she had lost the pendant around her neck. And she simply looked at the train tracks, hoping the train would magically arrive, but it never did. The flashback then ends, but Katrina still elaborates. A year later, Edna got a message that Jonathan had passed away in a tragic accident, but Edna absolutely refused to believe it because she was so heartbroken. It essentially altered her brain, and because of this, she still went to the train station every day to wait for Jonathan to come back. Basically, she was just in a very deep denial stage of grief. Katrina then experiences a memory, which was her watching her grandmother wait at the train station, even after it was long abandoned. And apparently, when Katrina was waiting at the train station with her grandma, almost every time she would mutter something about how she shouldn't have left Jonathan since she was pregnant with their daughter, Katrina's mother, at the time, indicating that she blamed herself for her daughter not having a father. Also, the reason why Edna would always wish it was snowing was because she figured that the train would have came later if it was snowing, so she could have actually made it on time. With that, Katrina's story of Edna and Jonathan came to an end, and May was very sad to have heard such a sad story. And Squirtle was too, as he started to tear up and tug on May's arm, wanting comfort. So May managed to muster up a smile and tell Squirtle that everything was alright. Katrina then points out a tree up ahead. It would be a tree where a Volbeat and an Illumise would dance around each other each summer, with a Volbeat on one side, Illumise on the other side. But after the tree withered, the Volbeat and Illumise stopped coming, and this made Edna even more sad, because she would at least watch this tree by the train station if she wanted some entertainment, but now she couldn't even watch that. Unbeknownst to Katrina and May, Meowth was around a corner of the train station, spying on the two of them, planning to capture May's Squirtle. But as he listened to the story of Edna and Jonathan, he actually got saddened as well and started to cry. A little while later, May had said goodbye to Katrina and went back to the Pokémon Center. Brock and Max had finished their meal, and Ash had finished his training, so the four of them all reunited in the Pokémon Center lobby. And during the nighttime, when they had all returned to the center, May explained to her friends about everything that had happened to her during the day and Edna's whole backstory, which made Ash, Brock, and Max pretty sad about hearing the story as well. But everyone cheered up when Max noticed that May's egg was starting to glow a faint white. So Ash and the gang tell Nurse Joy about this, and Nurse Joy offers to take the egg from May, explaining that it was about to hatch soon, so she could help nurse it. And just as May handed Nurse Joy her egg, though, Max pointed out that Squirtle was gone. May didn't fucking believe this, not believing that Squirtle could disappear 2 times in one episode, but as she looked around, she saw that Max was right. Squirtle had gone missing again, but she at least had a good idea of where it could have gone. And after she jumped up in surprise, she ran off by herself to go find it, heading straight for the train station, assuming that Squirtle must have went back there. Much to May's surprise, though, she didn't find Squirtle, but instead she found Meowth sitting on the same bench that Edna was sitting on before. May asks Meowth what the fuck he was doing, and Meowth says that he was looking at the beautiful full moon that had come out tonight, which he loved, and he was also taking some time to think about Edna's tragic story that he had somehow heard, not revealing how he had heard it. Although May quickly came to the conclusion that Meowth was eavesdropping, and scolded Meowth for this. And she continued to scold Meowth even more, realizing that he could have been the one to take her Squirtle. So she angrily asked him where he had hid her Squirtle, but in response, Meowth tells her to get off his back, implying that he hadn't actually stolen Squirtle. Suddenly, a familiar sound alerts May to Squirtle, which was Squirtle calling out to her while standing on the tracks, pointing to something, because it had found something. May quickly ran over to the tracks to grab a hold of Squirtle in case the train came by, and she saw what Squirtle was pointing to. Meowth runs over to May and Squirtle as well, and he sees what Squirtle was pointing to, and it was basically a pendant. May and Meowth immediately realized that this pendant must have belonged to Edna. It must have been her lost one. So May quickly opened it up to see what was inside, and saw none other than a picture of Edna's husband that May recognized from the picture that was black and white that she had seen earlier, and recalled how Edna had in fact lost her pendant after she had bumped into a guy and it had fallen off. May and Meowth were shocked at 2 things. 1, the picture inside the pendant. They certainly didn't expect it to be Jonathan's. And 2, they were shocked when the pendant started to glow a very bright gold. And May and Meowth then scream in fear and shock when the golden light expands and envelops May, Meowth, and Squirtle. Eventually, when the golden light fades, and May was able to open her eyes since she previously closed them because of the blinding light, she and Meowth look around, confused as to what the fuck happened. But they didn't have any time to really stand around and process their thoughts, as weirdly, despite the station being abandoned, a train whistle actually sounded, and a train sped toward them. Thankfully, though, they managed to jump off of the train tracks before getting hit by the train. Suddenly, Meowth and May were shocked once more when they noticed that the train platform that was before the tracks, where everyone was safe and all that, actually had a whole bunch of people on it now. So May and Meowth wondered what happened. How did the train station go from abandoned to lively in a matter of seconds? But their thoughts were then interrupted as a member of the train station staff runs over and scolds May for being on the train tracks along with Meowth. warning that playing on the tracks was dangerous, and the worker demands them to get out. So May, Meowth, and Squirtle do, not wanting to get into any more trouble. As May picks up Squirtle, much to May and Meowth's shock, again though, they find that the abandoned part of town was actually now bustling right in front of their very eyes, just like the train station. And not only that, the entire town looked totally different. The buildings were no longer abandoned, and the tree that Katrina had told May about with the Volbeat and Illumise hadn't withered either. Seeing this, May comes to the conclusion that somehow they had managed to travel back in time. Meowth shouts at May for suggesting something so stupid, saying that time travel was fictional, not impossible, but May tried to reason with Meowth and pointed out that there was no way any of this could be happening in the present day, and also points out that the town today, or the town right now at least, looked a lot like how it did back in the photograph that she had seen. So May and Meowth come to the conclusion that not only were they transported back in time, but they were transported back in time to the exact moment when Edna's husband was about to leave. How would May have proof of this, you may ask? Well, she then saw none other than Jonathan walk past, going into the train station. And she knew it was Jonathan because she recognized him from the photo. And as May and Meowth watched Jonathan walk up to the train station, they heard Jonathan mention to the train station worker, who he must have known, also this was a different train station worker than the one May and Meowth had run into, that he would be leaving this part of the city, despite Edna wanting to stay. In case Meowth wasn't following, which was a very real possibility since he didn't believe in time travel, May explained to him what was going on, and Meowth couldn't believe that they had actually traveled back in time, but he was forced to believe it. May then got the idea that perhaps being back in time could give him a chance to sort things out and prevent Jonathan from ever leaving, to help out Edna in her future, and makes her happy. However, Meowth looked worried and suggested that they should just focus on getting back into their time, wondering how they were possibly going to do that, and also pointed out that messing with shit that already happened years ago was a bad idea, since they were from the future. May didn't listen to Meowth, however, determined to help out Edna, and she stormed off further into the train station to catch up to Jonathan, with Meowth running after her, trying to reason with her, since he came to the conclusion that he would likely need May's help to get back, if he could get back, since the more minds they put together, the better. As determined as May was, though, to stop Jonathan from leaving, she was stopped by a third train station worker who asked for people's tickets if they wanted to board the train. And when he saw May running towards the train, he obviously got the impression that she wanted to board it, so he asked to see her ticket first, leading May to explain that she was just here to watch someone leave. However, the worker that kicked May and Meowth out before came back and personally carried May and Meowth out of the train station and threw them outside. Funnily enough, Meowth had actually been convinced by May, even though he was trying to reason with her, and wanted to stop Jonathan from leaving as well, but he looked at the ground in despair, believing that maybe there was no way to help him after all. But just then, it started to rain, and May realized what to do, and explained it to Meowth. Because it's like the cold sensation of the rain had triggered May's brainwaves, as she remembered and explained to Meowth that Edna would be appearing at the train station soon, since Jonathan would leave any second now. So May, with her idea, ran off, while Meowth followed, and apparently May and Meowth had to get into a balloon. Meanwhile, inside Edna's house, she had just read Jonathan's goodbye letter, and was just leaving her house to go find Jonathan and make up with him and potentially go with him, you know, for the sake of their daughter and all that. Thankfully, May and Meowth made it to a hot air balloon. Well, it was a hot air balloon that they had to make themselves, because they saw a few balloons, and they managed to combine them to make a hot air balloon due to Meowth's expertise with constantly making his Meowth balloons. So the balloon, in a way, kind of was similar to that one. And May, Meowth, and Squirtle ascended into the sky, just as the last calls for the train were heard, and Jonathan was about to get on. However, Squirtle was told by May to use Ice Beam on the clouds. Once they were at a high enough altitude, it took a little while, because nothing happened at first, but just as May had hoped, because of the Ice Beam, the rain turned to snow, which soon enough covered the whole town and prevented the train from leaving. Obviously, May got this idea when she remembered how Edna always wished it snowed, which would delay the train. And just then, Edna arrived at the train station, running towards the train. And just as two train workers were bitching about the snow and how they had to delay the train just because of a little bit of snow, Edna had shouted out through the train station to Jonathan, and Jonathan noticed her and was very happy to see her, but was very surprised because he didn't think that she would come. And also, along her way to Jonathan, Edna didn't run into the guy that she ran into before, so she didn't end up losing her pendant. Edna then told Jonathan that she couldn't live without him, and informed him that she was pregnant. Hearing this, Jonathan decided to stay in the town, knowing that it was probably best that he just stayed with his wife to be a father instead of focusing on school anyways right now, and the two of them walked off to their home, with Jonathan holding Edna in his arms. However, right as Edna and Jonathan walked out of the train station with May, Meowth, and Squirtle watching, they all noticed the tree that Katrina had mentioned before, where Volbeat and Illumise were dancing around. Everyone watched the Volbeat and Illumise dance around the tree, which Jonathan identified as a fir tree, and everyone was amazed by it, especially due to the dance looking even more beautiful, thanks to the glow that Volbeat and Illumise were creating when they danced, and also the snow that was now covering the tree. And May, Meowth, and Squirtle heard the townspeople collectively call the phenomenon of the Volbeat and Illumise glowing as the two lights of joy. May and Meowth in the balloon smile, very happy at the thought that they managed to impact the past and change the future for the better, helping out Edna and Jonathan. Just then, the pendant starts to glow with the blinding gold light again, which eventually envelops them again. As a result of the pendant enveloping them again, they had ended up not further back in the past, but instead back in the present. But admittedly, it was hard for them to realize this at first, because the train station was bustling with people, and trains were moving along the tracks. In fact, just like when they first arrived in the past, they almost got hit by a train and had to move out of the way of the tracks. May and Meowth then walk out of the train station, with May still holding Squirtle, and they see that this part of Fuchsia was nowhere near as abandoned as it used to be. It was now a lively, growing, and flourishing part of the city. Also, the buildings had a much more modern look, like they'd almost never been abandoned ever. Just then, it was confirmed that May and Meowth were still in the present, as they saw Ash, Max, and Brock run over to May, with Ash calling out to her, begging Meowth to quickly walk off by himself, so he didn't have to deal with getting caught by Ash and the gang. May was a little shocked to see Max, Brock, and Ash after all this time, but May quickly came to her senses when everyone, especially Max, shouted to her that her egg was starting to hatch. So they quickly rushed back to the Pokemon Center and crowded around May's glowing egg that Nurse Joy was nursing, and she confirms that it was about to hatch. Just then, 3 people come into the room and greet Nurse Joy and Ash and the gang. And the 3 people introduce themselves to May as they smile happily at her and reveal that they were a family of Pokemon pediatricians, Edna, Jonathan, and Katrina, leading May to realize that the older guy that was with Edna and Katrina, who she already recognized, was Jonathan. So she basically realized that she did have an effect on the future after all. And was suddenly shocked when Nurse Joy told her that Edna and Jonathan were some of the best people around when it came to taking care of Pokemon eggs, as May remembered how Edna and Jonathan ran a breeding center. And she also realized that, of course, Edna and Katrina wouldn't recognize her, because she actually did change the past, and she was just absolutely flabbergasted at this. But May was happy she changed things for the better, and examined that Edna still had the pendant around her neck. Meanwhile, as for Meowth, he was outside waiting to potentially kidnap one of Ash and the Gang's Pokemon like before, but he got distracted, as he too was very happy to see that he and May had changed the past to change the present for the better. And back inside the center, while Jonathan and Edna and Katrina were checking up on the egg, Ash pointed out that it was really starting to glow, and May saw that it was actually starting to hatch. And eventually, the egg actually did hatch, much to everyone's excitement, as it hatched into none other than an Eevee. And Jonathan examined Eevee, picking it up, and confirmed that it was healthy, and gave it to May, who hugged Eevee and greeted it, as Eevee smiled happily at her and her friends, and Jonathan, Katrina, and Edna in return. Meowth was very happy to see Eevee hatch from the egg, thinking it was cute. Not like that. But just then, Jesse and James come up to Meowth as he was watching through the window and confront him, questioning what he was doing, reminding him that he was supposed to be capturing a Pokemon, and they suggest that the 3 of them actually reunite, since all of their individual plans appear to have failed, and they just try and capture Pikachu together again. Meowth, however, simply just wished Jesse and James luck with stealing, since after he had just helped fix Edna's tragic past and watched Eevee hatch, he didn't feel like being a bad guy at the moment, and walks away to leave Ash and the gang in peace to enjoy Eevee's new arrival, leaving Jesse and James baffled. Later, the night arrives while Jesse and James had followed Meowth, still surprised. But back with Ash and the gang, Edna, Katrina, and Jonathan, Ash and the gang were in the midst of saying goodbye to Jonathan, Edna, and Katrina, with May holding her Eevee and prepared to go on the next part of the journey with the rest of the gang. But just then, Squirtle appeared out of its Pokeball that May had since put it in, and points out to everyone, including Nurse Joy, who had just come out of the center, the beautiful sight of the fir tree in the middle of the town square, now glowing since Volbeat and Illumise had returned and were flying around it, dancing, causing the lights of joy phenomenon again, as the tree glowed a beautiful light, which everyone enjoyed, finding it extremely good looking. May got a bit lost in her thoughts while standing next to Jonathan and Edna, who were hugging each other while watching the beautiful lights of joy phenomenon, while May declared to herself that she would always remember her adventures through time with Meowth, so long as she looked at this tree, and was very excited to all the adventures and battles that would await her and Eevee, declaring that her Eevee hatching on this day would also be a way for her to remember how she helped out Jonathan and Edna, who were now happy together.